Dento-osseous structures. When we say dento-osseous structures, this refers to the bony structures or the bones that makes up the
These
framework
include the
of the
upper
oral
jaw
cavity
or the maxilla.
The maxilla is composed of two bones, the right and the left, sutured together at the midline. The maxilla are joined together with other bones of the head, whereas the mandible, or the lower jaw, has no osseous union with the skull and is a movable or a gangliomo-arthrodial joint. Other bones include the palatine and the zygomatic bones. The maxilla make up a large part of the bony framework of the facial portion of the skull. It also forms the major portion of the roof of the mouth or the hard palate. It assists in the formation of the floor of the orbit and the sides and base of the nasal cavity. The maxilla is hollow, and it contains the maxillary sinus, or also known as the antrum of Highmore. The maxilla is roughly cuboidal in shape with a body and four processes. When we say process, these are bony projections that are named in reference to the surface or structure onto which they project to. This is a picture of the maxilla in different views, in different aspects, showing the four surfaces and the four processes of the maxilla. The four surfaces of the maxilla are the following: the anterior or the facial surface, the orbital surface, the posterior or the infratemporal surface, and the nasal surface. The four processes are the zygomatic process, the frontal process or the nasal process, the palatine process, and the alveolar process. These are the following landmarks, important landmarks that can be found in the maxilla. We will discuss each landmark one by one as we go, as we discuss the different surface of the maxilla. This is the frontal view of the left maxilla. This is the lateral view. It shows us the anterior surface of the maxilla. From this lateral view, this is the anterior surface. This is the posterior surface. The anterior surface of the maxilla is separated above from the orbital aspect by the infraorbital ridge here. Medially, it is limited by the margin of the nasal notch, and posteriorly, it is separated from the posterior surface by the anterior border of the zygomatic process. This is the zygomatic process. The zygomatic process has a confluent ridge directly over the roots of the first molar, called the zygomatic ridge here. The most pronounced ridge that can be found on the anterior surface of the maxilla is the canine eminence here. Okay. It corresponds to the root of the canine tooth, hence the name. Anterior to the canine eminence is a shallow concavity overlying the roots of the incisor teeth known as the incisive fossa. Posterior to the canine eminence, on a higher level is a deeper concavity called the canine fossa, here and here. The floor of this canine fossa is formed in part by the projecting zygomatic process. The major portion of the canine fossa is directly above the roots of the premolars. Above the canine fossa and below the infraorbital ridge is the infraorbital foramen here. The infraorbital foramen is the external opening of the infraorbital canal. This is again the lateral view of the left maxilla. This is the medial view of the left maxilla. This is the orbital surface of the maxilla, which is smooth and together with the orbital surface of the zygomatic bone forms the floor of the orbit. The junction of this surface and the anterior surface forms the infraorbital margin or ridge, which runs superiorly to form part of the nasal process or the frontal process. The thin medial edge of the orbital surface is notched anteriorly, forming the lacrimal groove. This is the lacrimal groove. Behind this groove, it articulates with the lacrimal bone and ethmoid bone and the orbital process of the palatal bone. Traversing the posterior portion of the orbital surface is the infraorbital groove. Orbital surface, this is anterior, this is posterior. This is the infraorbital groove. Beginning at the center of the posterior surface, the infraorbital groove runs anteriorly, the anterior portion being covered, becoming the infraorbital canal. This is again lateral view of the left maxilla, showing the infratemporal surface in relation to the anterior surface of the maxilla. This is the posterior view of the left maxilla. This is medial side. This is the lateral side. The infratemporal surface is bounded above by the posterior edge of the orbital surface here. Inferiorly and anteriorly, it is separated from the anterior surface by the zygomatic process and the zygomatic ridge. Again, the zygomatic ridge runs from the inferior border of the zygomatic process to the alveolus of the maxillary first molar, just like here. The infratemporal surface is more or less convex and is pierced in a downward direction by two or more posterior alveolar foramina here. Here, in this aspect, here, in this aspect. These two canals are on a level with the lower border of the zygomatic process and are somewhat distal to the roots of the third molar. The inferior portion of this surface is more prominent where it overhangs the root of the third molar. This is called the maxillary tuberosity. Medially, the maxillary tuberosity is limited by a sharp, irregular margin that articulate with the pyramidal process of the palatine bone and in some cases, the lateral pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone. The maxillary tuberosity serve as the origin for some of the fibers of the medial pterygoid muscle. And lastly is the nasal surface of the maxilla. This is the medial view of the right maxilla. This specimen has not been disarticulated completely and has the maxillary teeth in situ. This is the medial view of the left maxilla without that has been disarticulated. The nasal surface is directed medially toward the nasal cavity. It is bordered below by the superior surface of the palatine process. Anteriorly, it is limited by the sharp edge of the nasal notch. Here. So this is the superior border, the inferior border, rather. This is the anterior border. Above and anteriorly, it is continuous with the medial surface of the frontal process. Behind this, it is deeply channeled by the lacrimal groove, which is converted into a canal by articulation with the lacrimal and inferior turbinate bones. Toward the posterior and upper part of this nasal surface are large irregular opening into the maxillary sinus or the antrum of Highmore may be seen. In non-articulated skull, just like this opening is partially covered by the uncinate process of the ethmoid bone and the inferior nasal concha. Anterior to the lacrimal groove, the nasal surface is ridged for the attachment of the inferior nasal concha. Below this, the bone forms a lateral wall of the inferior nasal meatus. Above the ridge, for a small distance on the medial side of the nasal process, the smooth lateral wall of the middle meatus appears. Now we'll discuss the different processes of the maxilla. First, the zygomatic process. Zygomatic process is a roughly triangular eminence with its apex inferiorly directly over the first molar roots. The lateral borders are rough and sponge-like. The frontal process or the nasal process of the maxilla arises from the upper and anterior body of the maxilla. It's here. Part of this process is formed by the upward continuation of the infraorbital margin medially. Its edge articulates with the nasal bone. Superiorly, the process articulates with the frontal bone. The medial surface of the frontal process forms part of the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. The palatine process is a horizontal ledge extending medially from the nasal surface of the maxilla. The superior surface of the palatine process forms a major portion of the nasal floor. The inferior surface, here, shown in the picture, forms the hard palate together by the combination of the left and right palatine processes. They articulate as far posteriorly as the second molar with the horizontal parts of the palatine bone at the transverse palatine suture. The inferior surface of the palatine process is rough and pitted for the palatine mucous glands in the roof of the mouth and is pierced by numerous small foramina for the passage of blood vessels or nerve fibers, just like here. At the posterior border of the process is a groove or canal that passes the greater palatine nerve and vessels to the palatal soft tissue. The posterior edge of the palatine process becomes relatively thin where it joins the palatine bone at the point of the greater palatine foramen. This is the posterior border of the palatine process. Around this area is the horizontal portion of the palatine bone, which is removed in this picture. This is the greater palatine foramen. The palatine process becomes progressively thicker anteriorly from the posterior border where it becomes confluent with the alveolar process surrounding the roots of the anterior teeth. Immediately posterior to the central incisor alveolus, you can see a smooth groove that is half of the incisal canal, here. This opening is called the incisive foramen or the nasopalatine foramen, which carries the nasopalatine nerves and vessels. Last is the alveolar process of the maxilla, which is the inferior portion of the maxilla. It surrounds the roots of the maxillary teeth, giving them osseous support. So all this is the alveolar process. The process extends from the base of the tuberosity, posterior to the last molar, to the median line anteriorly. It merges with the palatine process medially, here, and with the zygomatic process laterally. The alveolar process has a facial surface, or labiobuccal plate, and a lingual surface, or a lingual plate. The alveolar process also has ridges corresponding to the surfaces of the roots of the teeth supported by it. The plates are very dense, and there's a thin cortical bone that separates interdental septa of cancellous bone. So this is the alveoli or the tooth socket of the premolar, maxillary first premolar. This is maxillary second premolar. The bone separating the two is called interdental septum, while the bone in between the three roots of the maxillary molars is called interradicular septa. The facial plate is thin until the distobuccal root of the first molar. The buccal plate over the maxillary second and third molars are thicker. Generally, the lingual plate of the alveolar process is heavier than the facial plate, except the lingual plate of the molars, where the lingual plate is also thin. This thin lingual plate over the molar roots is part of the formation of the greater palatine canal. The alveolar process is maintained by the presence of the teeth. Should any tooth be lost, that portion of the alveolar process that supported the missing tooth will be subject to atrophic reduction. Should all of the teeth be lost, the alveolar process will eventually be virtually lost as well. Just like in this picture. This is a picture of an edentulous patient or a patient without teeth anymore. You can see that there is no alveolar process anymore, and the maxilla and the mandible has lost their height. The alveolar process is longer, where it surrounds the anterior teeth and sometimes extending posteriorly to include the premolars. Again, the maxilla is a hollow bone and it contains the maxillary sinus. The maxillary sinus is pyramidal in form. Its base is directed toward the nasal cavity, and its summit extends laterally into the root of the zygomatic process. It overlies the alveolar process in which the molar teeth are implanted. Here you can see in this radiograph the radio-opaque line here corresponding to the floor of the maxillary sinus. This is the maxillary sinus. So you can see the relationship of the floor of the maxillary sinus with the roots of the maxillary molars. Occasionally, the maxillary sinus will extend forward far enough to include or to overlie the premolars also. Okay. This is another radiograph of the maxillary sinus here. This is the floor of the maxillary sinus, showing the relationship, its close relationship with the roots of the posterior teeth. The mandible is a horseshoe-shaped bone. It is movable and it has no bony articulation with the skull. It is the heaviest and strongest bone of the head. It supports the teeth of the lower dental arch and serves as a framework for the floor of the mouth. It is situated immediately below the maxillary and the zygomatic bones. Its condyles rest in the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. The mandible and the temporal bone forms the temporomandibular joint. The mandible has a horizontal portion and a vertical portion. The horizontal portion is called the body of the mandible, and the two vertical portions are called the rami. The rami join the body at an obtuse angle. This is called the angle of the mandible. The body of the mandible also has two surfaces, one external and one internal, which is not shown in this slide. The body of the mandible also has two borders, one superior and one inferior. The body consists of two lateral halves which are joined at the median line shortly after birth. This is one half of the mandible, this is the other half. The line of fusion is called the symphysis and is usually marked by a slight ridge. To the right and left of the symphysis are two prominences called the medial tubercle, the mental tubercle rather. These are found near the lower border of the mandible. A prominent triangular surface made by the symphysis and the mental tubercles is called the mental protuberance. Here. Immediately posterior to the symphysis and immediately above the protuberance is a shallow depression called the incisive fossa. There is also the canine eminence of the mandible, which is counterpart of the canine eminence found in the maxilla. However, this eminence does not extend down very far toward the lower border of the mandible. This is the external surface of the mandible. This is the internal surface. We'll discuss different landmarks found in the external surface of the mandible first. First is the oblique ridge. The oblique ridge extends obliquely across the external surface of the mandible from the mental tubercle here to the anterior border of the ramus, with which it is continuous. So this is the anterior border of the ramus, continuous with the oblique ridge. The superior border of the ramus is composed of two processes. The coronoid, the coronoid process, which is pointed, flattened, and smooth. It is roughened toward the tip to give attachment for a part of the temporal muscle. Second process is the condyle or the condyloid process. It is variable in form and is divided into a superior or articular portion and an inferior or a neck portion. The condyle is convex above, fitting into the mandibular fossa of the temporal bone when the mandible is articulated to the skull. Between the processes is a smooth semicircular notch called the mandibular notch. Another important landmark is the mental foramen. Here. It is the anterior opening of the mandibular canal. It is directed upward, backward, and laterally. The mental foramen is usually located midway between the superior and inferior borders of the body of the mandible and more often below the apex of the second premolar tooth. This position is not constant and sometimes it may be between the first and second premolars. Next, the internal surface of the mandible. We will discuss different landmarks that can be seen from this surface. First is the superior and inferior mental spines or genial tubercles. These are eminences found below the area where the two halves of the mandible are joined. At or near the lowest part of the mental spines, a well-defined ridge passes backward and upward, dividing the internal surface of the mandible into two portions. This ridge is called the mylohyoid line or the mylohyoid ridge. It occupies a position closely corresponding to the lateral oblique ridge on the surface. It is more prominent in the posterior portions until it reaches the anterior portion of the ramus. This ridge is the point of origin of the mylohyoid muscle. Above the anterior portion of the mylohyoid ridge, a smooth depression can be seen. This is called the sublingual fossa, where the sublingual gland lies. A small roughened oval depression can also be found on each side of the symphysis, immediately below the mylohyoid line and extending onto the lower border of the mandible. This is called the digastric fossa. This is called the submandibular fossa. This is a smooth, oblong depression located toward the center of the body of the mandible between the mylohyoid line and the inferior border of the mandible. It continues back on the medial surface of the ramus. The submandibular gland lies within this fossa. Next is the mandibular foramen, here, which is located on the medial surface of the ramus, midway between the mandibular notch and the angle of the jaw. It also lies midway between the internal oblique ridge and the posterior border of the ramus of the mandible. The mandibular canal begins at this point, passing downward and forward horizontally. The anterior margin of the mandibular foramen is formed by the lingual or mandibular spine. This is called the lingula, which gives attachment to the spinomandibular ligament. From the base of the foramen beneath the lingula is the mylohyoid groove. The mandible also has alveolar processes, the border of which outlines the alveoli of the teeth. The alveolar process is very thin at its anterior portion around the roots of the incisors, and it's thicker posteriorly around the roots of the molars. Comparing the alveolar process of the mandible to the maxilla, the mandibular alveolar processes, the facial plate of the mandibular processes is as heavy as the lingual plate, especially the bone buccal to the last two molars because it is reinforced by the external oblique ridge. Shallow triangular fossa can be found posterior to the third molar, here and here. This is called the retromolar triangle. The cortical plate over this fossa is not as heavy as the bone surrounding it, and it is more cancellous under the thin cortical plate covering it. The horizontal process of the palatine bone here. This is the palatine process of the maxilla. This is the horizontal process of the palatine bone. The horizontal processes of the palatine bone and the palatine processes of the maxilla forms the hard palate. The temporal process of the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic process of the temporal bone forms the zygomatic arch. This is the zygomatic bone. This is the temporal process of the zygomatic bone. This is the temporal bone. This is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. Together, they form the zygomatic arch, which provides attachment to the masseter muscle. These are my references.